Hi, folks. Welcome to Anarchist Wine Co.'s Inquisitive Sips. My name is Steve Ryan. I've got my colleagues here, Connor Birkin, who is our enologist and one of our winemakers at the winery. Connor, can you give a wave so everybody sees you?
Hey, everybody.
And Stuart Ake, whom you've all come to know and hopefully love from our executive team. And they're both out in the vineyards today. We've done this a few weeks recently where we have had a couple people kind of satelliting in through cellular technology, this newfangled thing. And they're kind of going to show some things in the vineyards. We've done this a bit on our Wine Foundry Wednesdays, but we haven't really brought it to the Anarchist Wine Co. Inquisitive Sips format, where we're going to speak a little bit more about what's going on in the vineyards today, what that means for where we're going as we approach harvest, and kind of two different aspects of the vineyard. Stuart, can you tell us where you are today, please?
Yeah, so I am, I am what's referred to as the Sonoma Coast, and it's a big growing region. We refer to them as AVAs, American Viticulture Areas, and I am what's called San Giacomo Vineyard, but they're Roberts Road property, which is located in what's referred to within the Sonoma Coast, the Petaluma Gap.
Thank you very much. And Connor, where are you today?
I'm in Rutherford, which is a little north of Napa, but also just the heart of Napa Valley, where it's just kind of the flat area of everything where it gets super warm and nice.
All right. Connor, just a heads up, you're freezing a little bit. I think it's because you're moving and bobbing and weaving, and maybe you can't keep up. So yeah, there you go. All right. Well, it is what it is. At least he's, an attractive young man to look at, and just an all-around great guy. So Stu and I will carry the load in case he blanks out over there. And Connor is in one of our Cabernet Sauvignon vineyards, so we're going to be talking about elements of the philosopher. Those of you that ordered the wines, I forgot to mention this before, but those that are new to the party, open up your wines now, get yourself glasses, and join in. We're going to start with the Blanc de Noir, and then we'll move into the philosopher. And so the Blanc de Noir, Stu, can you tell us more about Blanc de Noir?
Sure. Well, and some people say Blanc de Noirs, and that's because there's two Pinot grapes that are sometimes involved, Pinot Noir, Blanc de Noir, and then Pinot Meunier. But there's not a lot of Meunier grown around here. So we just focus in on the Pinot Noir, Blanc de Noir. And so a Blanc de Noir is, what we do is we grow Pinot Noir, and then we harvest it earlier than we would if we were gonna make a still wine. And then we just have a little bit of skin contact time. And so we just get this very, very, very light hue on there. So for all intent, we make a white wine with red grapes. And then we do a fermentation in bottle, a secondary fermentation in bottle to get the beautiful bubbles. This would be a traditional champagne method.
So, and other people call it Blanc de Noir because it's at least it sounds French, and the S is silent.
Yes, and there is that as well. Bordeaux, the X, joking.
Yeah. So, Stu, can you explain a little bit about why, when we're making a sparkling wine, how the decisions when we pick might change from if we're making a rosé? Because when we make a rosé, we're also taking a red grape and making a white wine, right?
Right, and we actually, in some ways, they kind of run parallel as well. So again, you take red grapes and you make a white wine with them, which means we are going to, as soon as we harvest the clusters by hand, we're going to bring them back to the winery. With a red wine, like what Connor's going to talk about, we're going to ferment those wines on the skins. We're going to extract color and flavor from the skins. With rosé, with a Blanc de Noir, no. What we're going to do is we're going to harvest those grapes. We're going to stick them in a press and press off that juice. where Steve was going with this is, where's the differentiation? What we want to do for both of these wines is harvest much earlier than we would for a still wine, because it's all about the acid. What we want is on rosé and on bubbles is to really have a high tartaric acid or high acid content, so that it triggers a salivary reaction in the mouth. So it's really good for food, and it's also lower in alcohol. So we're going to harvest. We measure in the United States and in most New World places, we measure sugar in something called bricks. It's not quite sugar, it's sugar-ish. It's the soluble solids, but the vast majority of those soluble solids are sugar. So we're going to harvest them 22, 21, as opposed to 24, 25, which we would do for a still wine.
All right. So sorry, I've got an old dog here who's a little blind and was bumping into things. So excuse me.
Hi, Bella.
Yeah, everybody say hi to Bella. Hi, Bella. It's turning into longer days at the winery, and running home to do these events means that I haven't been able to give her enough attention. So I apologize, folks. But we are dog people at the winery. So Stu, can you talk a little bit about what's going on in the vineyard right now, and where we are kind of in the growing season for Pinot Noir?
So I'm going to put down my glass temporarily, if you don't mind. And I'm back. And I'll show you, because we've just gone through a little transformation of the grapes. So you're thinking, oh, Pinot Noir, they're going to be red. Not yet. We have, I'm going to see if I can get in here. I don't know if you can see this little cluster.
Yeah, you can go a little closer if you can.
Okay. I used to be a hand model, but I'm kind of sensitive about that because I want to get royalties off of that. So what we have right now is something called fruit set. And a few weeks ago, when we were in the vineyard, we didn't have any of those berries on there. They were little teeny flowers. And we were kind of really hoping during that period when there was flowers that the weather would be, Mother Nature would be really nice to us. She was. What we don't want during that period is rain, and we don't want wind. And this area where I'm standing is notorious for wind. I don't know if you can see the, I try to be in a very protective area, and probably over the course of the next hour, these leaves are really going to start shaking over here. But we had a great fruit set, and so the clusters look rock solid all throughout. And then Connor will bring us up to speed on something, the next phase, in about 3 weeks, actually. It's another word. It's going to be a word. It's going to be the word of the day. You'll be quizzed on this. It's going to be called veraison.
Ooh, nice right there.
And Stu, so I'm gonna show a picture here. You right before fruit set, that all happens because of flowering. So just to
so you want me to, while you're pulling that up, do you want me to kind of talk about flowering for a bit, or for a second?
That'd be great.
Sure.
So
so grapevines are just like any fruiting plant, okay? And they are trying to propagate. And so the picture that Steve just pulled up shows those teeny little flowers. And you can see that they almost look like, little pellets or BBs. Those are, each one of them is going to become a grape if pollination occurs. Now, grapevines are, like you always think, oh, we need bees, we need hummingbirds, we need butterflies. Grapevines are hermaphroditic. They actually, they self-pollinate. So the calyptra kind of opens up, boom. And that's why I was saying, if there's no wind, no rain, we'll have a successful pollination. And I'm trying to see evidence of what we would refer to in the industry as something called shatter. Oh, I got one. Steve, if you want to come in here. So one that didn't quite work out. So I'm going to come in here and I'll show you that one that didn't quite make it. So you can see how those berries are really kind of, kind of set far apart. It's kind of like a secondary cluster. So it's not an ideal picture of shatter, but it wasn't a perfect fruit set. But you know what? That's okay, because we have too many grapes on the vine right now. And we're going to go through in a few weeks and start dropping clusters. And Connor and I can talk about that in a little bit. But I hope that kind of lets you know about fruit set and the precursor to that, which is called flowering.
So while we're on shatter, just since you found that cluster there, and Connor, can you, so Connor, for everybody's knowledge, Connor is what, 4 years out of Davis? Is that right, Connor?
Yeah, right. Or 3 years out of Davis.
Math is not his strong suit.
I know. Just great knowledge.
So Connor came to, he was the, after Davis, he was also the lead viticulture intern at Cake Bread Cellars, and then was doing most of the production at a winery down in Santa Cruz before we found him. And he started working for us in December, and he's been a terrific addition to our team. But Connor, can you talk a little bit about more in depth on what shatter is and whether it's is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What do you say?
Totally. So I think it can be looked at as good and bad, just depending on which side of the area you're on. If you're a grower, you don't want any shatter. You want to try and get as much yield as possible. But for winemaking, shatter's pretty okay. Because if you have shatter, you're gonna have less berries on the cluster, giving the plant a little more energy to concentrate all of its wonderfulness into the berries. Whereas if you had no shatter at all, you'd have a lot more berries, and that's awesome for the growers. They make some more money, more yield. But it's good and bads. But yeah, so shatter is basically, it's going to be a 10 to 14 day period after kind of bloom that you don't want any serious like inclement weather. You don't want any wind, any rain. Some areas get hail. It's more in the France area, but yeah, it's just kind of a 10 to 14 day period after bloom where you just want perfect weather.
The France area?
Yeah, the France.
It's I think if you look it up in the dictionary, it's right next to the word wonderfulness.
Yeah.
Ah, very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Totally.
Totally. Somewhere out in France, they get hail. I haven't seen it, but rumor has it.
Yeah. So
thank you, Adele.
So Stu, stepping back to the Blanc de Noir, as you're pouring some in your glass at a very appropriate time.
Sorry about that.
And I'll do the same. Connor, so Stu's on the Blanc de Noir, Connor is on the cab, and we didn't want them each taking 2 bottles with them since they're up valley and have to drive home tonight. But so Stu, for those that don't know, I get kind of a biscuity, sourdoughy kind of flavor to the wine. Can you talk a little bit about where that comes from, please?
So autolysis, yeah. So what we do is, what we're going to do is we're going to initiate a secondary fermentation in the bottle. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put yeast and a little bit of sugar in the bottle, and that yeast is going to consume the sugar. And then the longer we keep that it's going to trap the CO2. You can see the bubbles in there, and they have no place to go. But for a while, you'll see this sediment on the bottom of the bottles, and you'll get this yeasty, biscuity quality we refer to as it's triggered by the autolysis. And the longer we do that, the more we're going to get kind of those bread notes, B-R-E-A-D. And it's something that is sorely lacking from some wines called Prosecco or something like that. They're often kind of really crisp, clean, and light. I like the layers that go in with that nice long aging in bottle after that bottle fermentation that gives, yeah.
Yeah, so we those of you that have been on a number of these sessions, we've talked about, we tasted we've talked sparkling a little bit, but not specifically this vintage in 2015, which, and we've talked about our Chardonnay program, and we've talked about our Pinot Blanc program, and we've talked about aging in barrel for those still wines. And and stirring the lees, and the lees being the yeast and the proteins and the sediment that comes out of solution and rests on the bottom. And then we stir it up. It's a French word called bâtonnage. And we stir that up, and that gives mouthfeel. And this 2015 Foundry Wines Blanc de Noir, if Stu has the bottle, he can hold it up one more time with the label showing, would be great. Ever the marketing wizard here. And so that's giving you more mouthfeel. And so it's more of a roundness to it, but it does give you that kind of biscuity, I call it biscuity. It is whatever it is to you at the end of the day. But it's definitely a more kind of yeasty and fuller feel to it. And then Stu, when we want to get that out of there, we actually are doing this with our 2018 Blanc de Blanc, which is made from Chardonnay. So it's lighter in color. But we're doing this at the winery right now. Stu, can you talk? I'm going to pull something up here. Will you talk about how that's done?
We're literally doing it right now. So you might see those pictures of, if you look at old photographs, well, there you go. There is our gyro palette or gyro palette. And just like in those old photos that you see in Champagne, where they have what's called a riddling rack, what we're doing is we are slowly coaxing that yeast down into the neck of the bottle. So we're going to slowly rotate this palette. And so eventually it's going to form a plug. I hate to say it. I mean, this is going to be really gross, but if you have a cat, or you know of cats, sometimes they have like a hairball that they cough up. I know, wrong, bad image, but that's what it's like. We're going to get it right down there. And then right before we kind of move into what's called the next phase, which is called dosage, once we kind of figuring out how we're going to finish the wine, when we're getting ready to bottle, we're going to open up that top really quickly. And that yeast plug is going to be pushed out by the CO2 in there. And then we put the champagne, that larger cork in that you're really familiar with the cage to keep it trapped in. I did a pretty bad job of describing that, but I hope it kind of connects the dots for you a little bit.
With the picture, it's basically a mechanized, we put the bottles in cages when we first bottle them, and then we store them in there. It's called tirage. And it ages in there. That's where the secondary fermentation happens. And then when we get to the Euro palette or gyro palette, depending on, or Euro palette, as Stu said, together.
I'm from Chicago.
So it'll take that cage 5.5 days to slowly turn until it's completely upside down. And then at that point, that's when we move forward. So we've got 2 of those mechanized Euro palettes at the winery right now. We've got 8 of those cages of that wine that we need to get through and do it. So it's going to take us a couple of about a month or so, and then we'll move forward and bring the truck back that'll do the dosage, which is where we pop a little bit of still wine, which will be it'll be anywhere from, we're still doing trials on what we want, but we're drinking the Blanc de Noir. So this one was a 0.75.
0.75.
And it basically means it's 0.75. I believe that's
grams
liter
per, yes.
Correct. Grams per liter.
5 grams per liter of sugar that was added, but that sugar was in the form of still wine Pinot Noir. That we'll just we use it from another vintage and do it. And so we do trials. So Connor and Patrick and our assistant winemaker, Fernando, as well as Stu, me, and Philip and Val will do trials on this stuff and kind of come up with what we like. And then at the end of the day, Patrick just kind of says, okay, you guys are all wrong. This is better. We're going to do it my way. And he's usually right. I can say that because I agree with him most of the time. But so anything else we need to know about sparkling wine, Stu, before we kind of move on? And also, I failed as the kind of rookie moderator here. If anybody has any questions, pop it into the Q&A, or you can also use the chat. And we do have, I see that Sarah in the East Bay, I believe Sarah's in the East Bay, is asking about Veraison, which we're going to have Connor talk a little more about. in just a minute. So we'll get into that. Connor, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Is it time to talk about some verasion and what that means?
Yeah, so I think it's, well, maybe not quite yet. Let's maybe start with, I'm gonna switch. It's funny, it's like a cooking show. I just pulled this out of the oven and it's ready to go. So I just happen to have one here, folks. And this is our 2014 The Philosopher by Anarchist Wine Co. And this is a Cabernet Sauvignon. Technically, we've talked about this in the past sessions as well, but to revisit it, in order to call it a Cabernet Sauvignon or any varietal designate, it has to be 75% of that varietal. So this is 75%, but we call it, on the label it says red wine. And that's really just because we go for the best blend. And if we designated the wine always as a Cabernet Sauvignon, and it was 72%, but that was better than the 78% or 80% or whatever. We just try to stick with the quality on it. So so on the 2014 Philosopher, it's a blend of a number of different vineyards. I'm actually going to pull up something here, and sorry, total rookie here.
So are you pulling up a map of the 4 vineyards that we source from?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to try to do.
Okay.
And so yep, now I've got it. So I'm going to pull this up, and we're going to rock and roll, so that while this is up, Connor can kind of talk through a little bit about maybe. Connor, can you see this on your phone, on your screen?
It's just a black photo right now.
I think it's nighttime.
Okay.
Yeah, it's night.
That's
nighttime.
So basically, the point is that we've got 4 different vineyards there that we're spotlighting, and you see Cabernet Sauvignon number 1 in the middle of it, and then 2 up North Valley, 3 down South Valley, and 4 over along the Vaca range up in the mountains. And so
Steve, since they can't see the map, should I do a little kind of interpretive dance? You want to bring it back and I can kind of show them?
Please.
Yes. Oh, so nobody can see the map. Okay, how about now? Sorry about that, folks.
It's
okay,
still,
no,
I think.
All right. Yep. We're bringing it back.
So, okay. So basically, Napa Valley in some ways is kind of like a big bowl, a big egg, if you look at it from the top. And on one side, on the western side, we have the Mayacamas range, mountains. And on the east side, we have the Vaca range. I am just east, there we go, I am just west of the Mayacamas right now, because I'm on the Sonoma side. But you can see, right in the center where Connor is, it says Cab Sauv number 1 in Rutherford. And then, but it's not, this is not in the order of priority. It's just, we source from 4 vineyards. And then you can see Cab Sauv source number 2 is up in an area of Napa Valley called Pope Valley, north and east of Howell Mountain. Cab Sauv number 4, sorry, we're trifocals here and I'm looking at it on a telephone, is up by Atlas Peak, Pritchard Hill on the east side of Napa. And then our third cab source down south in an area called Coombsville.
All right, and so I'm going to stop the share now. Again, sorry about that, and I apologize again for my technical ignorance. Connor, why? So we source these things from all over Napa Valley, as we just saw. Why is Napa Valley ideally suited, at least in our minds, ideally suited for Cabernets and the growers' minds, because Cabernet Sauvignon takes up such an abundance of the plantings. But why is it so well suited to grow Cabernet Sauvignon?
Napa just has this awesome pattern of warm weather during the summers. And it gives us these things called degree days, which is a certain amount of time from a certain date to an endpoint that where the temperature crosses a certain threshold. And then these degree days are super important for ripening levels, which is part of our word verasion. And so all across Napa Valley, we're going to have different rates of veraison, just depending on if you're in the valley floor, on the hillside, as well as just the benchlands. But yeah, so Napa is just pretty diverse all around, but really great for Cabernet due to just how warm it is.
Yeah, and so that's a bold take to take on the term degree days. I remember when I first learned about what degree days are, it was like, bleh, like it made zero sense to me whatsoever. And essentially it's the temperature and the amount of time, they have going through in the growing season, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Above a certain temperature.
Thank you. Yes, above a certain temperature. And so you talk about veraison, and we talk about being, Stu mentioned we're 3 weeks out from that. Connor, can you talk a little bit more about what veraison is and why it's so, we also should point out that there are these benchmarks throughout the growing season that we really kind of strive to hit, and that are kind of celebratory, and we just acknowledge them within the industry. And it starts with bud break. Well, you could kind of say it starts with pruning, but that's kind of more like there's really nothing else going on at home in January, so that's what pruning is. So that's not a big thing. But bud break in late March or April to fruit set, or flowering, then fruit set. And then Connor, tell us what veraison is.
So veraison, right before this, we were getting a lot of acid accumulation in these green berries. So if you were to eat them right now, they'd be super tart, super sour, which isn't so fun to eat. But veraison is when we start getting some color on the berries, depending if it's a red or not. But we're going to start getting sugar accumulation as well as water. So the acid levels are going to start dropping, and then our sugar levels will increase as well as our water content. And what's interesting about veraison is it's going to be different kind of vineyard to vineyard. And it's interesting to track all around Napa to see where we're at. And that's what makes it so fun with sourcing 4 different cabs from all over Napa, is we get so much complexity when we all blend it together.
There we go.
But,
right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And it was a great, actually, I don't know if everyone got to see it, but Steve pulled up a photo where it had some purple berries, some green berries. And we're going to start seeing that. And it happens really quickly. Like you'll see 1 purple berry, 2 purple berries. You come back 2 days later, 3 days later, and a quarter of the cluster is now purple, right? And then boom, it transforms really, really, really quickly. Thank you. Yeah.
Hopefully you can see what I pulled up there.
Yeah.
And that's probably, and we measure it in percentages, and it's
75%.
Yeah. 75.
Yeah.
And on the topic, Connor, do white grapes go through veraison?
They do. They unfortunately just don't turn the pretty color purple, but they'll still be getting nice and plump and filled with sugar and still tasting awesome.
That's kind of like that wonderfulness comment.
The wonderfulness.
There's nobody around here to hear me laugh, so it's okay. Yeah.
So getting into the philosopher, Connor, you mentioned there's 4. So there's 4 different main vineyards that we work with, but on this wine, there's also 4 other components of Cabernet Sauvignon that are blended in, but it's really 4. So there's 8 total Cabernet sites, but 4 of them make up the core of that. There's also a bit of Syrah in the blend as well. And I'm clearly having technology problems, so I'm not going to pull up the exact percentage while we're doing this, because I might show everybody like my inbox or whatever is going on. So the percentage, I want to say it's a healthy, almost close to 10% at least. Why is Syrah in the blend, Connor?
That just kind of goes with our whole brand approach of the Anarchist Wine Company likes to do these unconventional blends. And with Syrah not being a Bordeaux varietal, it's interesting to mix that with Cabernet. It's a Rhone. And so for us to add that in. It's a little different, but also adds some really nice complexity, giving it, you know, maybe a nice pepper note, a little extra spice. But yeah, just it really adds well to the blend.
And I'm going to interrupt real quick for all of the friends and clients and fans and everything that are texting me right now. I'm not actually looking at. I literally have got like 15 texts from people that I see coming in, but I'm kind of in the middle of this thing, so I totally get it. I'm having problems sharing my screen. Stu, for what does the Syrah do?
Steve, can you repeat the question, please?
What does the Syrah do for you? So Connor mentioned kind of peppery notes, but
Yeah, so I'll back him up on the pepper, but I'm also just going to say, kind of echo something what he said before. Like Anarchist, we are about kind of like, there's traditional approaches to winemaking, and that's beautiful. We do that for what you're tasting what I'm tasting right now, the Blanc de Noir, right? And but for Anarchist, we're trying to create the next generation of winemaking. So it's less about time and place. That's why we're sourcing from 4 different vineyards, and it's all about the pursuit of flavor. So Connor talks about that pepper note. I'll absolutely back him up, and I'll also say that Syrah, grown where we grow it, also brings like this kind of rich, fruity character, particularly to the mid palate. And so it's kind of an interesting twist. And when we were first kind of, Steve, when we were kind of first exploring this thing, it was like, were the wine police going to come out and arrest us for going outside of the norm? But there are no wine police. And some people might turn up their nose at this, but it's really all about the pursuit of flavor and creating the next generation of winemaking.
Yeah, and what I like about it too is that, I think about the different varieties that play on the palate. And so traditionally with Bordeaux varieties, we have Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot. And Petit Verdot gives you length and finish. Cabernet Franc, front palate and aromatics. Malbec, Merlot, mid palate. I call it fleshiness, but really just kind of rounding out the mid palate. And Syrah gives you this mid palate, but with structure. And when I talk about structure, I think of dimensionality and the shape in your mouth that also finishes a little bit longer and then goes into the Petit Verdot, because there's obviously Petit Verdot in there as well. So one thing I don't think we really touched upon, and because Connor's out there at a cab vineyard where we do this, Patrick and his team will direct this to the growers quite a bit, is dropping fruit. And earlier Connor talked about, he mentioned shatter, and he was talking about yields and how it can be a good thing or a bad thing for us as the buyers of the fruit. And this gets into the business of wine a little bit, but the yields are really what reflect the bottle price at the end of the day. And that's the easiest way to think about it. So we get into contracts with growers, and we're either going to be in an acreage contract where we're going to take everything that grows, and we get to direct how we want it farmed, or we're going to take a contract for a set amount of tons, but yet your tons are estimated based on certain rows and blocks in that vineyard. So if you have shatter, you're going to get less yield, and say we want 500 cases of a wine and we can only end up with 300 cases, that's a challenge. And so we're kind of running around a bit, but we've been blessed in Napa Valley and Sonoma, and well, really all of California, with this amazing span of knock on wood, 8 incredible vintages, with 2019 so far shaping up based on the dry season we've had and the weather we're having, the lack of wind and rain during flowering. So we're looking at another 2019 to be another out of this world vintage. But there are some things that we do to control, not so much for the yield, but for the quality. So Connor, can you talk about dropping fruit for a minute, please?
Yeah, so you just mentioned quality, and so we have these solar panels, the leaves, which will focus all their energy onto the clusters, and we want to try and make that cluster have as much aromatics as possible. And so you'll get a secondary cluster on a shoot, kind of spreading the plant out a little thin. So it's good to just go cut the secondary crop of that little cluster. So that way the plant can just focus all of its energy on that one cluster and make it more wonderful.
I just dropped some fruit, actually. So
Nice.
You did. That was good.
Yep.
So you guys are, Stu, you are at San Giacomo, Roberts Road, and Connor, you're in Rutherford. So you're 10 miles apart, maybe, as the crow flies ish.
Probably about 10 miles. Yep, probably.
All right. So for those that are learning the geography of, because Stu's in Sonoma County, Connor's in Napa County, and so does that really make a difference? You're 10 miles apart. So what do you got for me, Stu?
I mean, you cannot stress this enough how different those 10 miles are. And it's kind of it's a fact. There's kind of two primary factors which go into that. The ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and the San Francisco Bay. So even though I'm only a few miles closer, that mountain range, the Mayacamas, kind of prevents a lot of the fog from coming into onto the Napa side of the equation. And I don't know if you can see it where I am, but it's there's wisps coming in right now of the fog, and it's definitely gonna be socked in tonight. Where I am, I assume it is, because I can see it. And but what that does is it kind of shuts, the cold temperatures shut the vines down at nighttime and wind. So the vines kind of put on their jackets and they go dormant. And so they're going to stop producing sugar and retain their acid. Certain grapes love that. Pinot Noir for one, Chardonnay for another. On Connor's side of the equation, he was talking about those warm temps. Cab needs heat. And so when the fog gets trapped by the Mayacamas and keeps it on the Sonoma side, Napa definitely warms up, except in the south part of an area called Coombsville and near where the winery is, because we're pretty close to the bay. But where Connor is right now in Rutherford, it gets toasty. And I'll bet, what is it right now where you are, Connor?
83.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's still toasty.
I can assure you, temperatures have dropped over the last 40 minutes where I am, and I'm excited to walk back to the car and just put on one more layer, because it's going to get pretty chilly here. Not for another hour, but we're definitely going to dip down to the upper 50s, low 60s tonight. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's 50s definitely.
Yeah, where you are. So Connor,
Yeah.
you're on the valley floor, right?
Right. Yeah, and so we're gonna just have those longer ripening times, and that's gonna have a play on the tannins as well. It's gonna kind of soften up some of our fruit, just because we're gonna have longer time to ripen, longer times for those tannins to soften up.
Involved.
So,
yeah.
when Connor talks about, I think we were maybe having some connectivity issues there, but when Connor talks about softened tannins, you oftentimes, if you pay attention to tasting notes that winemakers will write on the materials you'll receive about wines and how you learn about wines, or on the websites, or whatever, all of that stuff, you'll hear things like fine grain tannins, coarse tannins, chunky tannins, and that probably doesn't make it into the marketing speak, because chunky tannins doesn't sound as pretty.
That's my belly.
Yeah.
And so what Tanner's talking about is those smooth tannins, where the tannins are going to be what really finish. It looks like I'm just trying to be a wizard and playing with my beard, but the tannins that are smooth are not going to be really big and chewy in your mouth. And tannins are the things that kind of make your lips stick to your teeth. And fine grain tannins are where it's just a little bit less aggressive, I guess, if that's fair. Stu, would you?
Yeah. So I'm going to say valley floor, where Connor is kind of noted for fine grain tannins. Look, the wines get a lot of exposure to sun all day long. Those vines also, whenever it rains, all of the nutrients erode to the valley floor. Those vines are living they're living the life of Riley. You go up on the hillsides, whenever it rains, all the nutrients have eroded away. So, my thing is always like the hillside plantings, the mountain plantings, those are kind of like the art majors in college. Like they're kind of shivering in a corner, smoking a cigarette, wearing a beret, like they need protein. So, but where the valley floor, rich, ripe, and round, on the hillsides, those tannins tend to be kind of tight, powerful, and I got kicked out of art school. So, and kind of tight and powerful and structured. And so that's why we want, I think Philosopher's the greatest hits package. You get the mountainside tannins, the valley floor, lush, plush, ripe, softened tannins. You get kind of a different tannin profile in Coombsville. And so you get to put all these pieces together for a really nice mouth and, just nice palate presence.
Yeah, well said.
That was so much better than what I said. And the anemic French guy in the beret was solid too. So we're going to get close to wrapping this up. So before we do, Stu, out in the vineyards, it is July 1st. We're going to see Veraison happen in the next 3 weeks or so, three to 5 weeks, depending on the variety and the vineyard, climate, and all of that. And what's one of your hot topics? What's one of your, kind of give me a one-word idea or a concept that you kind of want to hammer home, and it doesn't have to be one word because that might need more explanation. But what's things right now that we're talking about?
Well, can I do something called canopy management? Can I say canopy management, a 2-word answer? So, and the reason I'm saying that is, if you look at, we are going to farm each row differently. On this side of my canopy, can you see how there's all these leaves here? Where are the clusters? Where are the clusters? Lo and behold, they're protected by the leaves. Why? Because I am facing to the west. That's why the sun is in my face. What we go through and we remove the leaves to allow a certain amount of ripening. If we pull too many leaves, these grapes are going to get baked by the sun, even here on the Sonoma coast. On this side of the canopy, I'll kind of zoom in really quick. I don't know if you can see this here, this little cluster here. I am not really good at zooming when I'm not looking at it, but this side, we've removed a lot more leaves, so that with the intent that since it's the morning over here, this side of the canopy can get hit with the sun and can get ripened. So we end up over the course of the growing season, the morning side and the afternoon side of the canopy, the grapes will be pretty even ripening. Was that one word, Steve?
Yeah, I think you nailed it down. You could have just said, when you were talking about the canopy and looking for the clusters, like button, who's got the button kind of game.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not hip to that game, Where's Waldo? Something like that, is that right? Okay.
Same sort of deal. So Connor, I'm going to flip the same question to you, and feel free to do it in less than 100,000 words. What do you
I'm going to go with Veraison again for maybe everyone who just heard that word today. And it's the rate at the clusters mature. We're going to start getting sugar accumulation, and how different it can be across all varieties and location. And yeah, Veraison's at a really exciting time. So I really like that word. And it's the point at which like physiological maturity is happening for the vines.
Now, Steve Ryan, you're sitting there all at home. You toss questions to Stuart. You toss questions to Connor. What about you, man? What I mean, what's something, a concept that you would want to highlight?
Well, so I'm gonna take a 2-pronged approach. I'm going to dovetail off of your multi-word answer, Stu. And one thing I enjoyed talking about, which we barely touched on when I mentioned something about yields being a function of the price of a bottle. And I thought of this earlier when you were talking about carbonated, the secondary fermentation carbonating in the sparkling bottle. And maybe this is because my role primarily is an operator at the winery. And so the bottle, the sparkling wine comes in a very thick bottle, and it's very expensive. And so sparkling wine, quality sparkling wine that actually has enough CO2 in it is not cheap, and a big portion of that is because it goes into the glass, actually, because the glass needs to be able to hold and withstand that secondary fermentation. And
I'm going to pour a big portion into my glass right now, too.
That's a great idea. So, it'll have less pressure in that bottle when it's in the trunk of your car on the way home. But it all comes back to before glass was able to be manufactured to be thinner and more of a kind of meticulous shape and all of that. And so that's how they were able to do it. And then it came down to the physics of the glass needed to be able to hold the pressure to where you're talking about, 75 PSI within the bottle to get super geeky and lame. But otherwise, from the Vineyard standpoint, and sorry about that weird dovetail there, but
no, that was great, dude. That was great.
Thank you. Well, it's just us girls here, so I thought you'd enjoy it. And
the punt, right?
Yeah, the punt is very thick and deep, and so it creates more stability for the walls of the bottle. So there's kind of physics and methodology that goes through everything there. And I guess maybe I mention it because all of this leads up to this really cool thing, and this will get to my second point, is that harvest. And so anything we're talking about in the Vineyard, I'm going to focus on harvest. This is our last Inquisitive Sips for the next handful of weeks. We're going to take a break for the rest of the summer. As I'm looking at myself on the screen, I look really tired. So I'm going to go ahead and bow out for the summer. We're focusing on a number of things at the winery to get ready for harvest. That's really when the magic happens. And we'll be back in the fall to kind of show you some more things in the winery, how we make our wines, how we kind of make the decisions that Patrick and Connor and Fernando and Stu and I make when we put this stuff together. And the idea of this has been to kind of give you lift the veil of winemaking Oz. That's something that Stu coins around the winery quite a bit. And we're very passionate about education. We're very passionate about wine, obviously. And we kind of like the idea of making what is normally a pretentious kind of very verbose type of industry, bring it down to just break it down into more simple concepts and have fun with it. Wine is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be enjoyed with friends and family. And therefore we want to bring it to you to say thank you very much for joining us over the last several weeks. We will still be continuing our Wine Foundry Wednesdays, every handful of Wednesdays coming up. And we're going to just focus on delivering great content when we have the new ideas to be able to bring to you. You've tasted through, I think, everything in our lineup now. We've had 19 or 20 different wines throughout this course of our Foundry Wines brand and our Anarchist Wine Co brand. They're all available on anarchistwineco.com. Just go to the wine selection. You can do that and see those. Our wine club is there as well. We absolutely appreciate the support and the enthusiasm. This has been a really fun adventure for us, and we can't wait to be back in the fall. We've gained so many new friends throughout this, and so thank you very much for joining us. We'll give you plenty of notification when we come back online again. And meanwhile, don't be a stranger. Feel free to drop us any sort of a line, and if you have any follow-up questions, you can email us at orders@anarchistwineco.com is the easiest way, because there's a few of us that check those. So I'd just like to raise a glass and toast to all of you for joining us, and thank you so much. We do
Cheers.
Cheers. We do have our other folks that have joined us in the past. Patrick, who's busy at the winery blending right now. And we have a big team of people working to make this stuff very, very special and to bring it to you. So thanks to all of them as well. Cheers, folks, and have a good rest of the summer. We'll see you in the fall.
Cheers, everybody. Sarah, Delcy.
Cheers.